The scent of burnt coffee and ozone hung heavy in the air of Cubicle 4B. David Miller barely noticed. For the past 17 hours, his world had shrunk to the glowing 27-inch monitor in front of him, a universe of cascading green text on a black background. Outside, the city of Austin was waking up, its early morning light a pale, apologetic grey against the window. Inside Innovatech Solutions, only the hum of the servers and David's frantic heartbeats broke the silence. His daughter Lily's school picture was taped to the corner of his monitor. Her 7-year-old smile, missing a front tooth, was the lighthouse that guided him through these sleepless nights. He was a data analyst, a digital cartographer, charting the vast, unseen oceans of information for a company on the verge of making history. Today was the day. Today, Julian Croft, the formidable CEO of Innovatech, would sign a deal worth $4.2 billion, merging their nimble, innovative company with the corporate behemoth, Titan Dynamics. For everyone else, it was a day of celebration. Stock options would mature, careers would be made, and Innovatech's name would be etched into the annals of tech history. Champagne was already on ice in the executive wing. But for David, a knot of pure, cold dread was tightening in his stomach. It had started as a flicker, an anomaly in the final data integration pre-check. It was a task no one else wanted, a digital janitorial job to ensure a smooth transition. But David was meticulous. He didn't just sweep the floors, he checked for cracks in the foundation. He'd found more than a crack. He'd found a sinkhole. Buried deep within the integration framework provided by Titan Dynamics, hidden under layers of benign-looking code, was a parasite. A dormant algorithmic siphon. It was elegant, vicious, and nearly invisible. It wasn't just a bug, it was a weapon. And David knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that it was aimed directly at the heart of the company he had helped build. He had to warn them. He had to stop the signing. But how could a man in Cubicle 4B stop a $4 billion freight train? He looked at Lily's picture. For her, he had to try. It began, as most disasters do, with something small. A single line of code that felt out of place. It was labeled tr-asset-sync.protocol, a seemingly innocent tag for a routine that was supposed to harmonize Innovatech's asset database with Titan's larger network after the merger. David had been scrolling through millions of these lines, his eyes bleary, his mind numb from the sheer volume of data. It was 3 a.m. His boss, Mark, had told him to just give it a cursory glance. "It's a formality, Dave. Their tech is top of the line. Just tick the box so we can all get rich." But David couldn't just tick the box. It wasn't in his nature. The protocol was using an encryption standard that was slightly outdated, but also heavily modified. It was like finding a beautifully carved 17th century door handle on a brand new spaceship. It was interesting, but it made no sense. Why would a tech giant like Titan Dynamics, led by the visionary Marcus Thorne, use something so peculiar? He isolated the script and ran it in a sandboxed environment, a secure digital playground where he could observe its behavior without risking the main network. At first, it did exactly what it was supposed to do. It catalogued files, cross-referenced data points, and prepared them for transfer. It was clean, efficient. He was about to dismiss his suspicion as sleep-deprived paranoia when he saw it. A flicker. A single packet of data, infinitesimally small, that didn't go to the target server in the simulation. It went somewhere else, an IP address that resolved to a server in the Cayman Islands. His blood ran cold. He dug deeper, peeling back the layers of the code like an onion. Each layer revealed a new level of deception. The script wasn't just a sync protocol, it was a Trojan horse of breathtaking sophistication. It was designed to lie dormant until the exact moment the merger was finalized and the networks were fully integrated. Then, triggered by a remote signal disguised as a routine network handshake, it would execute its true purpose. Phase 1 would copy everything. Not just the public-facing data, but the core of Innovatech, the source code for their revolutionary AI, Project Chimera. It would steal years of research, proprietary algorithms, and the very soul of the company. Phase 2 was even more sinister. Once the data was siphoned off, the script would begin to subtly corrupt Innovatech's own files, introducing tiny errors, changing a 1 to a 0 here, a decimal point there. It would be a slow, creeping death, Invisible at first, but designed to make the company's technology unstable and eventually worthless. The backups? The script had a function for that too. It would verify the corrupted data as clean, ensuring that any attempt to restore the system would only reinforce the damage. Innovatech wouldn't just be acquired, it would be consumed from the inside out, leaving an empty shell. The $4.2 billion wasn't a purchase price, it was the cost of the anesthetic, while Titan Dynamics performed the autopsy. Marcus Thorne wouldn't be a partner, he'd be a predator who had found a way to make his prey pay for the privilege of being eaten. A wave of nausea washed over David. He looked at the clock. 7:15 a.m. The signing was scheduled for 10 a.m. at the Gilded Spoon, an exclusive restaurant downtown where deals of this magnitude were sealed over lobster and vintage wine. He grabbed his phone, his fingers trembling as he dialed his boss, Mark. "Mark, you have to listen to me," he said, his voice ragged. "The Titan deal, it's a scam. Their code is a virus, a weapon. It's designed to steal everything and bankrupt us." Mark's voice on the other end was thick with sleep and annoyance. "David, what the hell are you talking about? Did you pull another all-nighter? You sound crazy." "I'm not crazy. I have proof. I've documented it all. The protocol is a Trojan horse." "David, listen to yourself," Mark sighed, the sound of rustling bedsheets in the background. "You're a data analyst, not a conspiracy theorist. This deal has been vetted by the best lawyers and cybersecurity firms in the country. You found a coding anomaly. It happens. Now go home, get some sleep. I'll see you at the celebration party tonight." The line went dead. Panic set in. Mark was a wall. The executives were an impenetrable fortress. He frantically typed an email, attaching his logs, his analysis, the damning packet captures. He sent it to Julian Croft's executive address, to the entire board, to legal. A moment later, a series of automated replies pinged back into his inbox. "Delivery failed. Message blocked by network security protocol." Of course, they had set up a communications firewall to prevent any leaks or interference in the final hours before the signing. The very security meant to protect the deal was now ensuring its destruction. He was locked out. The system was designed to ignore a voice like his. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly in the empty office. His legs felt weak. He looked out the window at the city, at the traffic already building on the freeway. He was one man against a corporate machine, greased with billions of dollars and deaf to any warning. He looked back at Lily's smiling face on his monitor. She believed her dad could fix anything. Today, he had to. He grabbed his keys and his worn leather jacket. He didn't have a plan. All he had was the truth, a stomach full of fear and the image of his daughter's smile. He ran for the door. The drive to downtown Austin was a blur of screeching tires and blaring horns. David's beat-up sedan, usually reserved for school runs and grocery trips, was weaving through traffic like a getaway car. His mind raced faster than the engine. He was replaying the lines of code, the packet trails, the sheer, breathtaking arrogance of Marcus Thorne's plan. How could everyone have missed it? The lawyers, the multi-million-dollar security consultants, the entire board of directors. Maybe Mark was right. Maybe he was just a sleep-deprived analyst who had fallen down a rabbit hole of paranoia. The doubt was a cold poison seeping into his resolve. What if he burst in there and was wrong? He wouldn't just be fired, he'd be humiliated, possibly even sued into oblivion. He would lose everything: his house, his savings, his reputation. He would become a cautionary tale whispered in office break rooms. He gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. Then he glanced at the passenger seat where Lily's booster seat sat. He pictured her telling her friends at school, "My daddy is a hero, he works with computers." Integrity. It was a word he used with her often. Do the right thing, especially when it's hard. He couldn't teach her that lesson and then fail to live it himself. The doubt evaporated, replaced by a hard, unshakable certainty. He was right. And he would not let Marcus Thorne destroy the future of thousands of employees, the future he was trying to build for his daughter without a fight. He screeched to a halt in front of the Gilded Spoon, abandoning his car in a loading zone. The restaurant was the definition of old-world opulence, a place of hushed tones, polished mahogany, and valets who looked down on cars worth less than 6 figures. He sprinted past them, ignoring their shouts, and pushed through the heavy glass doors. The hostess, a tall, impeccably dressed woman named Genevieve, intercepted him before he could take 2 steps into the marble-floored lobby. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, her voice a mixture of professional politeness and undisguised alarm. He knew how he must look, wild-eyed, unshaven, his clothes rumpled from a night spent in an office chair. "I need to see Julian Croft. It's an emergency," David panted, trying to catch his breath. "Mr. Croft is in a private meeting. He left strict instructions not to be disturbed." Her posture was a solid wall of polite refusal. "You don't understand. It's about the deal. It's faulty." Her expression didn't change. "I'm sure if you contact his office, his assistant can schedule an appointment for you." She was trained for this, to handle disgruntled people, to maintain the serene atmosphere of her establishment. He was just another piece of unpleasantness to be swept away. He glanced past her, down a corridor lined with art, and saw 2 imposing men in dark suits standing outside a pair of ornate double doors. The private dining room. He was running out of time. He had to change tactics. He couldn't be the frantic madman. He had to be someone with a purpose. He lowered his voice, trying to inject a note of urgent authority. "Listen," he said, looking her directly in the eye. "My name is David Miller. I'm with Innovatech's Data Security Division. There's been a breach. A time-sensitive one. I have a hard drive for Mr. Croft that he needs to see before he signs anything. My instructions are to deliver it to him personally." It was a lie, but it was a plausible one. He saw a flicker of indecision in her eyes. She was weighing the risk of disturbing a powerful client against the risk of ignoring a potential security threat. I'm not sure," she stammered. "Every second we stand here, the company is at risk," David pressed, his voice low and intense. "The liability, if something goes wrong because I was held up in the lobby, will not fall on Mr. Croft. It will fall on you." That was the final push. Fear of liability was a language everyone in this world understood. Her professional composure cracked. "This way," she said, her voice barely a whisper, and she led him down the hallway. The 2 bodyguards outside the door tensed as they approached. Genevieve gave them a slight, nervous nod. "He has an urgent delivery for Mr. Croft." One of the guards put a hand on David's chest. "We'll take it to him." "No," David said, his heart hammering against his ribs. "My orders are hand delivery only." Before the guard could argue, David saw his chance. A waitress, a young woman named Clara with a kind face and tired eyes, was exiting the room with a tray of empty coffee cups. For a split second, the door was ajar. It was now or never. He ducked under the guard's arm and pushed past the waitress, ignoring her startled cry. He burst through the doors and into the silent, tense atmosphere of the private dining room. The room was a cathedral of corporate power. A long, dark wood table gleamed under a crystal chandelier, reflecting the faces of the men who were about to change the landscape of the tech world. At the head of the table sat Julian Croft, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, his posture radiating an aura of absolute command. He held a Mont Blanc fountain pen, its nib hovering an inch above a thick stack of documents. Across from him sat Marcus Thorne, the CEO of Titan Dynamics. He was younger than Julian, with a predator's smile and eyes that seemed to absorb all the light in the room. He was the picture of modern success, dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than David's car. Lawyers and executives from both companies flanked them, their faces a mixture of reverence and anticipation. The air was thick with the smell of expensive leather, aged scotch, and money. So much money. The moment David burst in, every head snapped towards him. The hushed reverence of the room shattered like glass. "Don't sign it!" David yelled, his voice raw and desperate. Julian Croft's face, a moment ago calm and triumphant, hardened into a mask of cold fury. He placed the pen down with deliberate, menacing slowness. "Who in God's name are you?" he demanded, his voice a low growl that could make generals tremble. The 2 bodyguards rushed in behind David, grabbing his arms. "Sir, we're so sorry." He pushed his way in, one of them grunted, trying to haul David back out. "Let him go. Julian commanded, his eyes never leaving David's. The guards released him but remained poised, ready to pounce. You have 10 seconds to explain why I shouldn't have you arrested for trespassing before you are thrown out of my sight, Julian said. David's heart was a drum solo against his ribs. All the eloquent speeches he had rehearsed in his head vanished, leaving only the raw, ugly truth. The deal, he gasped, pointing a trembling finger at the documents on the table. It's a fraud. Titan Dynamics. They're conning you. They're conning all of us. A ripple of murmurs went through the room. Marcus Thorne, however, didn't flinch. He let out a soft, condescending chuckle. Julian, it seems you have a bit of an employee morale problem, he said, his voice smooth as silk. Perhaps we should postpone while you handle your internal affairs. He was masterful, instantly framing David as a disgruntled, unimportant cog in the machine. I am not disgruntled, David shot back, his voice rising. I'm the lead analyst on the pre-integration data audit. I found it. In your code, Thorne. A kill switch, a siphon. It's designed to steal our IP, corrupt our systems, and leave us with nothing. The $4.2 billion is a smokescreen. Julian Croft looked from David's wild, earnest face to Marcus Thorne's cool, amused one. He was a man who trusted his gut, and his gut was screaming that something was wrong. But he also trusted his team, his lawyers, the months of due diligence. My cybersecurity teams, the best in the world, have been over every line of Titan's code. They found nothing, Julian stated, his voice laced with skepticism. Because they weren't looking for it, David insisted. It's hidden, disguised as a sync protocol. It's a zero-day exploit that wouldn't activate until after the merger is complete. You wouldn't know what hit you until it was too late. Marcus Thorne stood up, brushing an imaginary piece of lint from his sleeve. This is absurd. Julian, this man is clearly unstable. He's probably just panicking about losing his job after the merger. Let your security handle this so we can get back to making history. He gestured to the guards. Please, remove him. The guards moved forward again. David knew he had only one move left. It was desperate, insane, and would change his life forever, one way or another. As the guards reached for him, he lunged not towards the door, but towards the table. With a guttural roar of pure desperation, he kicked one of the table's heavy carved legs with all his might. The massive oak table bucked like a living thing. The billion-dollar documents went flying, scattering across the plush carpet. Glasses of water and untouched scotch toppled. A bottle of ink for the ceremonial pens rolled and shattered, spattering a black Rorschach test across the pristine contract. A plate of pastries crashed to the floor. The room erupted in chaos. The lawyers gasped. Julian Croft shot to his feet, his face a thundercloud of disbelief and rage. In that single violent act, David had crossed a line. He was no longer just an interruption. He was a saboteur. The silence that followed the crash was more profound than the noise itself. It was a vacuum, filled with the stunned disbelief of a dozen powerful men. Shards of glass littered the floor, and a dark stain of spilled ink bled slowly into the fibers of the expensive rug. A permanent scar on the sacred ground of the deal. David stood panting, his leg throbbing from the impact, his chest heaving. He had their attention. Julian Croft was the first to recover. His face was pale, his lips a thin white line of fury. You, he whispered, his voice trembling with a rage so deep it was almost silent. You are finished. You will not only be fired, I will personally see to it that you are prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. You will never work in this city, in this industry, again. Julian, allow my security to handle him, Marcus Thorne said, his voice retaining its smooth, controlled veneer. But David saw it now, a flicker of something in his eyes. It wasn't anger, it was fear. A tiny, almost imperceptible tightening around his pupils. He was afraid. It doesn't matter what happens to me, David shouted, his voice cracking. He ignored the guards who were now cautiously circling him. He pointed a shaking finger, not at Marcus, but at the sleek silver laptop sitting on a small credenza by the wall. It was Marcus Thorne's personal machine connected to the restaurant's secure Wi-Fi. The proof is right there. Everyone turned to look at the laptop. It seemed innocuous, a simple tool of business. What are you babbling about now? Julian Croft demanded. He's running it, David said, a desperate realization dawning on him. He wouldn't just build a weapon like that without testing it, admiring it. He's running a live, final stage simulation, a ghost network mirroring ours. He's probably watching a real-time feed of the data siphon as we speak, savoring his victory before it even happens. It's the height of arrogance. Check his laptop. Check the network traffic. Marcus Thorne laughed, a short, sharp bark that sounded utterly false. This is a new level of fantasy. My laptop contains proprietary Titan Dynamics trade secrets. I'm not going to let this lunatic go anywhere near it. He started to walk towards the credenza, his intention clear. He was going to close it, shut it down, erase the evidence. No, David yelled, taking a step to intercept him. One of the guards grabbed his shoulder, spinning him around. Don't you move, the guard snarled in his ear. But Julian Croft hadn't become a billionaire by being unobservant. He had seen the flicker in Marcus's eyes, too. He saw the subtle, almost panicked haste in Marcus's step as he moved towards the laptop. He saw the way Marcus's confident mask was beginning to slip, revealing the frantic calculations happening underneath. For months, he had negotiated with Marcus, and he knew the man's tells. This was not the swagger of an innocent man being wrongly accused. This was the panic of a gambler whose bluff had just been called. Julian held up a hand. Stop. The single word cut through the tension like a razor. Everyone froze. The guards, Marcus, David, all eyes were on the CEO of Innovatech. Julian Croft walked slowly, deliberately around the wrecked table. He picked up a single page of the contract from the floor, glanced at the black ink smeared across the signature line, and let it drop from his fingers. He walked past David, his gaze fixed on Marcus Thorne, who now stood defensively in front of his laptop. You say he's a lunatic, Julian said, his voice dangerously calm. A disgruntled employee. It's a simple enough matter to prove. Let's see the laptop, Marcus. Julian, this is insulting, Marcus blustered, trying to regain control. We have a $4.2 billion deal on the table. Are you really going to let it be derailed by the paranoid delusions of a low-level programmer? He's not a programmer, he's a data analyst, Julian corrected him, his eyes like chips of ice. And he just staked his entire life on this claim. He kicked over my table. He ruined a contract I've worked on for over a year. People don't do that unless they're insane or they're telling the truth. And he doesn't look insane to me. He looks terrified. Show me the laptop. It's confidential, Marcus said, his voice rising in pitch. He reached behind him, his hand fumbling for the lid, trying to close it. I will not. But he never finished the sentence. In a movement so fast it was a blur, Julian Croft lunged forward. He didn't shove Marcus aside. He didn't argue. He did something no one in that room could have ever predicted. He reached past Marcus, grabbed the expensive lightweight laptop with both hands, lifted it high over his head, and with a roar of pure, cathartic fury, he smashed it down onto the marble floor. The sound of the laptop shattering was a violent, percussive crack that echoed the breaking of the deal itself. Plastic and metal screamed in protest. The screen spiderwebbed into 1,000 pieces, and the keyboard keys scattered like broken teeth across the floor. The room, which had been simmering with tension, was now plunged into a state of shocked, absolute silence. The only sound was the faint, pathetic whirring of the laptop's dying fan. Marcus Thorne stared at the wreckage of his machine, his face a canvas of disbelief and horror. The color had drained from his cheeks, leaving him a ghastly shade of white. His carefully constructed world, his multi-billion-dollar heist, had been reduced to a pile of expensive junk. But the silence was shattered by a new sound, tinny and electronic, coming from the pile of broken hardware. A triumphant musical fanfare, the default notification chime of Innovatech's own project management software, played from the laptop's dying speakers. It was the sound that played when a major project phase was marked complete. Marcus's face went from white to a sickly grey. That sound was the final damning piece of evidence. The simulated data transfer, the one he was admiring just moments ago, had just finished. He finally broke. His mask of cool superiority shattered, revealing the panicked, cornered animal beneath. He crumpled to the ink-stained carpet, a pathetic ruin in a suit that cost more than a house, letting out a choked, desolate sob. He was defeated not by a CEO or a guard, but by an algorithm of his own making, turned against him by the very man he had dismissed as a nobody. The sob was the only sound in the room for a full 10 seconds. Then one of Titan's lawyers, a man named Henderson, whipped out his phone. His thumbs flew across the screen. His face, already pale, turned the color of ash. "Oh my God," he breathed. "The market just opened." He looked up, his eyes wide with terror. "We're in freefall. The emails, the confession. It all went public. Pre-market trading was a bloodbath. We've lost 30 billion in market capitalization in 5 minutes." The karma was no longer abstract. It was a number, a catastrophic, world-breaking number. It was the sound of an empire turning to dust, broadcast live from a shattered laptop on an ink-stained floor. Marcus Thorne let out another wretched sound, the noise of a man watching his own legacy be immolated before his eyes. Julian Croft watched him, his face impassive, a Roman emperor observing the fate of a fallen gladiator. He then turned his gaze to David, and the look was not one of gratitude, but of cold, piercing assessment. The bodyguards, unsure of their role now, simply stood by the door as uniformed police officers, alerted by the restaurant staff, began to file into the room. The air of power evaporated, replaced by the mundane authority of badges and procedural questions. The titans of industry now looked like what they were, a collection of men in expensive suits, standing amidst the wreckage of their own greed. Marcus was helped to his feet, his hands cuffed behind his back, his eyes vacant. He didn't say another word as he was led away. When the room was finally cleared of the Titan delegation and the police, only Julian, his CTO Robert Vance, and David remained. The silence returned, heavy with unspoken questions. Julian walked to the window, his back to them. "You," he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the floor. "Mr. Miller, you took an unbelievable risk." "I saw no other path, sir," David said, his exhaustion finally settling in. Julian turned around slowly, a faint, dangerous smile played on his lips. "Path? Mr. Miller, you didn't follow a path. You vaporized the entire landscape with a tactical nuclear weapon you built in your cubicle." He gestured to Vance. "Robert here had a plan, an elegant one, a honeypot, a poison pill. We were going to let the deal go through, let Marcus steal the decoy data, and then detonate it inside his network. It would have been a quiet corporate assassination. Messy lawsuits, but we would have won." He took a step closer to David, his eyes boring into him. "But that wasn't good enough for you, was it? You couldn't just trust the plan. You had to do all of this." He swept his arm around the ruined room. A cold dread, different from before, crept up David's spine. This wasn't a thank you, it felt like an interrogation. Vance stepped forward, his face a mask of professional concern. "David, what you did was reckless. The worm that triggered that notification chime, that wasn't just a simple alert. I've been getting reports from my team. It wasn't our code. It was yours. An unsanctioned, unauthorized piece of software deployed on a foreign network. Do you have any idea the legal exposure you've just created?" David met the CTO's gaze. For the first time all day, a measure of calm settled over him. "It wasn't a notification worm, Robert, and it wasn't just reckless. It was the only move I had left." Julian Croft's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Enlighten us." "Thorne's arrogance was his weakness," David began, his voice steady. "When I found the Trojan horse, I also found the back door he used to monitor it. A digital peephole. He couldn't resist watching his own genius at work. I used that peephole to get in. I didn't just suspect he was running a simulation on his laptop. I was watching him do it for the last 2 hours of my shift." Robert Vance stared, his mouth slightly agape. "You piggybacked his own surveillance system." "Yes," David said, "and I planted my own code. It wasn't just a worm, it was a dead man's switch. I programmed it with a list of email addresses. The SEC, the Justice Department, the top 12 financial journalists at the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg. It was designed to do one thing. Upon sensing a catastrophic hardware failure or a sudden violent network disconnect, like, for instance, a laptop being smashed on a marble floor, it would immediately compile all the simulation logs, Thorne's personal notes on the heist, the Cayman Islands IP address, everything, and broadcast it to the world. The room fell completely silent. Even Julian Croft's predatory smile faltered, replaced by a look of stunned, profound reassessment. He had thought David was a pawn, a useful, chaotic pawn, but a pawn nonetheless. He was wrong. The stock market didn't start to crash because of a rumor, David continued, his voice barely above a whisper. It crashed because every major financial desk in the world received a detailed, irrefutable confession of securities fraud, IP theft, and conspiracy from Marcus Thorne's own laptop, time-stamped 2 minutes after it was destroyed. Julian stared at David, truly seeing him for the first time. This wasn't a terrified analyst who got lucky. This was a grandmaster who had seen the whole board and sacrificed his own queen to checkmate a king. You planned this, Julian breathed, a note of awe in his voice, kicking the table, the shouting, pointing at the laptop. You were baiting me. You needed me to be the one to smash it. I was desperate, sir, but I wasn't stupid, David replied. I couldn't touch his laptop myself. But I knew if I created enough chaos, if I pushed Thorne hard enough to make him panic, you would see it. I gambled that your instincts would lead you to do something decisive. I just gave you the most tempting target. Julian Croft let out a short, sharp laugh, a genuine one this time. It was the sound of a man who had just discovered a creature even more dangerous and cunning than himself. Borderline illegal? He scoffed at Vance. Robert, what Mr. Miller has done here is a work of art. A masterpiece of digital insurgency. He didn't just break into the man's house, he rewired it to publicly confess every sin before burning itself to the ground. The CEO's gaze locked onto David's again. The power dynamic in the room had fundamentally shifted. I've been suspicious of Thorne for a year. I felt it in my gut. My board, my lawyers. They were all seduced by the numbers. $4.2 billion is a powerful anesthetic. Vance's plan was our in-case-of-emergency legal strategy, but it was defensive. It was reactive. He walked over to the shattered laptop and nudged a piece of the casing with the toe of his expensive shoe. What I needed was chaos. An event so public, so humiliating, that it would shatter the narrative of the deal itself. I needed an excuse to act. He looked up, his eyes gleaming with a newfound respect. When you burst through that door, Mr. Miller, you weren't an interruption. You were the final piece of my puzzle, and, it seems, the architect of your own. He walked back to David, stopping just a foot away. I am creating a new position, Director of the Office of Corporate Integrity. It sounds like a boring HR title, but it's not. You won't be in the chain of command. You'll be outside of it. You will have access to everything, from the janitor's closet to my personal email. Your only job is to find the cracks in the foundation before they become sinkholes. You answer to no one but me. Your first official act will be to review the termination file for a manager named Mark. David stood motionless, the offer washing over him, so much bigger than a simple promotion. It was a transfer of trust, a coronation of sorts. Why me? David asked, his voice barely a whisper. Julian Croft's expression softened for the first time, a flicker of something human in the old shark's eyes. Because of what you said earlier. You have to be able to look your daughter in the eye. In my world, that kind of currency is rarer and more valuable than all the money we almost lost today. I have hundreds of employees who will do what they're told. I need one who will do what is right. And apparently, he added with a wry grin, one who knows how to burn down the entire forest to catch a single wolf. That evening, David drove straight to Lily's school. The world felt different, sharper. The setting sun cast long shadows, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was on the right side of them. He saw her on the playground, her laughter carrying on the breeze. It was the only stock option that had ever mattered. She saw him, and her face lit up. "Daddy," she squealed, running and leaping into his arms. He hugged her tightly, burying his face in her hair, the scent of playground dust and childhood innocence washing away the stench of burnt coffee and deceit. "You're early today," she said happily. "I finished my work," he said, his voice thick with emotion. He hadn't just finished his work. He had redrawn the map. He hadn't just saved his company. He had outmaneuvered two of the most powerful men in his industry. each playing their own lethal game, and won. As he held his daughter's small, trusting hand in his, he knew he hadn't just earned a new title. He had earned the quiet, unshakable peace of a man who, when faced with the abyss, had not backed down. He had stared into it, and he had made sure the monster on the other side blinked first.